but it's still pretty cool.
Much appreciated. Thank you all. Welcome, everybody. I'm Jeff Perlman with CBIZ Borden Perlman. I want to thank you all for coming today. Everyone here has something in common. You're either a CHUBB supporter, a CBIZ Borden Perlman client, or a CHUBB policyholder. And our goal is you'll be considering becoming all three of those by the end of the evening. So that's our goal tonight. I do want to thank our speakers. I'll get to introduce them in a minute.
Louder, Jeff? Yeah.
Louder. Closer to the microphone. Okay, got it. Check.
Or raise the microphone.
So after they're done speaking, there's going to be a Q&A, and for those who ask a question, we're going to have a Thomas Sweet chocolate bar. There's an ad for Thomas Sweet. So make sure you think about questions and don't be shy. I also want to, before I introduce the speakers, I was given a long speech here for introducing the speakers. Does anybody want me to read the long speech?
No.
No. Okay, we're going to skip that, but we are going to play a game, and the game is. So we have a CHUBB swag bag here, a lot of fun things in here. I'm not going to tell you exactly what's in there, but there's some really cool things in here. And the game is whose birthday is closest to Steve's. I don't know Steve's birthday. Steve, what is your birthday?
September 25th.
September 25th. Anybody got a birthday in September? Raise your hand. Anybody in the 20s? What's your birthday? Oh my God. All right. Milt, what's 20? 20. That's the winner right there. September 20th. Come on. What are the odds of that the CHUBB speaker and the CHUBB person who runs New Jersey have the closest birthdays? That was not planned. So I want to thank Kathleen Biggins and her team for being here. I want to also thank the CBIZ Borden Perlman folks who put this together, Heather Vogel and Alexis Mirando. Thank you guys very much. Also the originator of this idea, Kathy Veek. Where's Kathy? Kathy was the originator of this idea, so Kathy, thanks for putting this all together, and really appreciate that. So just two quick words about Kathleen and Steve. Kathleen, from 2014 till now, has been behind Sea Change. She's led the charge. She's depoliticized the issue, which is a very difficult thing to do right now. Blue state, red state, Republican, Democrat. It has nothing to do with what Kathleen is talking about tonight. Steve Fischel, CHUBB executive, who oversees New York Metro. We'll talk tonight about, from CHUBB's perspective, risk management, global risk, and that's it. I'm going to turn it over to, which one? Me.
So first off, thank you guys so much. It is such an honor to work with CBIZ and CHUBB to bring this important message forward. And it is just so heartwarming to see friends and new faces in our audience today. So thank you all for joining us. I want to do a quick shout out to the woman on our side who made this all possible, which is Molly Jones, who has really orchestrated this. Thank you, Molly. And I also want to note that while you get to see me a lot up here with a microphone, we are a team. And this entire endeavor has been fueled by a wonderful group right here in Princeton. We are growing that team. It's becoming bigger, more diverse. We're expanding and have team members now in South Carolina and Georgia. And And all of us are committed to helping people understand the risk of climate change, because it's coming and it's coming fast, and the sooner we recognize what's coming, the better we will be able to prepare for it. We have had a banner fall, and in part, it's been aided by our team down in Georgia and Columbia. We were down in Georgia in September. We talked to about 400 people, Chamber of Commerce, Rotary clubs, a private event with conservatives at a home, as well as schools. And then just last week, we were down in South Carolina, where we were invited to a business symposium. And the first day, we spoke to students from college and from the business school and from high school in the AP courses, telling them about what's coming, and then it was followed with a job symposium, letting them know about the jobs that were in South Carolina and the new technology that is driving so much economic development. And then the next day, we were lucky enough to be the keynote in the morning, and the governor of the state, McMaster's, was the keynote in the afternoon. So it was a heady experience and an exciting one to be able to address a room full of business people in South Carolina and share our messaging with them. And the one thing I would, thank you. And the one thing that I would note is the thing that I believe really helps our messaging work, really helps people change their mind, begin to grasp the enormity of the risk in front of us, is the economic equation. And the fact that the costs, the pain of climate change are really coming into clearer focus. We are feeling them in our communities, we're seeing it on our TV, and yes, we're beginning to see it in our insurance premiums. The actual risks are going up, and it is cascading across different parts of our financial system and our society. The other part of that financial equation is the fact that these new jobs that are coming with renewable energy, with new clean tech, are creating supporters all around the country. So while climate change may not be a welcome term in South Carolina and Georgia, clean tech jobs sure are, and they are embracing them in a major way. And this kind of dichotomy of the pain and cost on one side and the opportunity on the other is indeed changing people's perspective. Now, perhaps the poster child for this change in our economic reckoning of climate change risks and hazards is indeed the insurance industry. Because think about it, it is created to share the risks so that we are resilient enough to bounce back. But as I said, the risks are changing due to climate change. And so much of what we have experienced has been based on what history has shown versus what we know is coming in the future. The past is no longer a prologue, and that is upsetting the markets as we move. A quick vignette, though I think in talking with you guys here in this audience, we heard several people already who are losing insurance or couldn't buy insurance. But the Wall Street Journal ran an article last week talking about someone who had a beautiful home in the West Palm Beach area who opened his letter from his insurance company and discerned that his insurance costs had gone up to $110,000 a year. So what did he do? Well, he shopped around, he got it down, and he put a for sale sign right in the front of his yard. And his was not the only for sale sign. There is a reckoning coming. And again, as we mentioned, the sooner we understand what's coming, the better we'll be able to protect ourselves and prepare. So with that, I'm going to hop into a deep dive into why the risks are happening, and then I'm going to hand it over to Steve to tell us what the insurance companies and the industry is doing to pivot and to become prepared for our new future. And I'm going to sit with them for a few quick questions and then open it up to the audience. Sound good? All right. Let's go. We would go if the there we go. So just to set the stage, CHUBB Insurance, and indeed the entire industry, has been very loud and vocal about the fact that climate change is real and poses an existential threat. This is directly from their website. saying that it is indeed an existential risk to the planet and human activity is a direct and contributing cause, and that concerted effort by the world community, including governments, businesses, and citizens, is necessary to avoid its worst impacts. So what is this thing that's causing so much havoc, and why aren't you working? How about that? How about that? Okay.
Do you want to stand there that way you feel like you can move around and not attach?
No, I'll just tether. Everybody knows I like to walk, but I'll just walk in a circle. So what is climate change? Climate change...
You gotta go back one slide. No, she did.
No, I did. Unless you want to read that again. You want So, now I'm off. How about here? Okay, so what is climate change? It is literally just the changes in our long-term weather patterns. It's our hot, our cold, our wind currents, our ocean currents, our snow, our rain. And when we talk about it, it really is just the changes since the mid-20th century. And why is it happening? Because we are putting up greenhouse gases up into the atmosphere. And what that is doing is upsetting the balance on where nature stores carbon. So if you think about it, nature stores carbon in the oceans, in the atmospheres, and in the earth. And when you think about what fossil fuels are, I think it will help us understand why it's happening. They are bits of plant and animal matter that fell to the earth millions of years ago, got silted over time, heat and pressure turned into pools of carbon, oil, gas, and coal. And humans came and we started to use it to power our vibrant economies that we all have benefited from. But in doing so, we upset the balance that had existed all of the time that our civilization has flourished. And how much are we putting up? Well, actually quite a lot. Even going back 800,000 years, you can see that the CO2 levels bandied really between 150 and 300 parts per million. And these were through the natural cycles the Earth has always gone through ice age and thaw, ice age and thaw. And then in 1910, we broke out of the natural patterns, breaking over 300 parts per million. Today, we're at 421 parts per million. And scientists say if we were to continue on our current emissions path, we would hit close to 1,000 by the end of the century. And I know you guys may have seen the slide before, but it's my favorite slide. So bear with me if you've lived through it once before. And the reason I think it's my favorite slide, because to me it represents the big picture of what this shift means. On the bottom, we have time, going back 20,000 years. On the y-axis, we have temperatures from about 9 degrees colder to about 11 degrees hotter. The gold line is average global temperature. The white are just kind of markers for us to have as reference points. So 20,000 years ago, we were in a glacial period of the ice age. We had a mile of ice over Manhattan, and the southernmost glacier ended right at exit 9 in New Brunswick. Much of the world was uninhabitable. And then over about 8,000 or 9,000 years, nature moderated the temperature, coming up to what more or less has been the average global temperature for the last 10,000 years. And that temperature is right around 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's a great temperature for human productivity. It's also a great temperature for many of the animals that have evolved to share the Earth with us today. But it is not a temperature the Earth has been at very often in its long history. It's not like the Earth wants to revert back to that temperature if we knock it off that point. And then once we hit that 60 degrees Fahrenheit, we got to settle down. We did farming, we did civilization. That little hump is the medieval warming period when the Vikings grew vegetables in Greenland. The divot, the ice age, when the glaciers came down, causing all sorts of food deprivation, upheaval, even wars, showing that small changes in average global temperature really do impact how we experience life on the surface. And then you see it going up, up, and away, landing somewhere between 3.6 and 10.8 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of this century, with the most current data showing that we're aiming between 6 and 7 degrees hotter. So let's think about that. 8 years for nature to moderate, to literally march those trees from Mexico to Montana and to create the ecosystems and biodiversity that we depend on. And now we are potentially triggering a similar delta in the next 100 years. And that's scary, and that's why all of the countries of the world came together and said, or 196 of them, not quite all of them, but they said, we aren't going there. We aren't going to go to those high numbers. We have to keep to those low numbers, that 3.6, which correlates to a 2 degrees Celsius, or even better, a 1.5 degrees Celsius, because at those levels, we think we can handle what nature's going to throw at us. But above that, it becomes much more difficult. So what are these changes that nature is throwing at us? Well, the first one we're going to delve into is heat. This graphic is from NASA, shows how average global temperature has changed from the pre-industrial time to today. When it is blue, it is colder than average, white average, yellow warmer, and red hotter. So as you can see at the end, the red really comes crescendoing in, and that's because we aren't just breaking records, we're really shattering them. The 10 hottest years have all been recorded since 2010. This summer, we had the hottest summer ever recorded. We had the hottest ocean temperatures ever recorded. And I believe I just read from our friends at Climate Central that as of October, this was the hottest 12 months ever experienced by humans. So we are on a roll, and that roll is going in the wrong direction. And what that means is that our summers are getting hotter, and that we are experiencing more periods of extreme heat. And what it also means is that it's going to continue, because as long as we put up greenhouse gas emissions, it's going to get hotter. This is a projection if we were going to continue on our current emissions path that shows that our area would feel like an area in Georgia, Augusta, Georgia, by the end of this century. Quite a bit hotter than we are today. And CHUBB has taken notice. This is directly from their website showing how the fact that we're changing the climate is cascading into all these different areas of risk, whether it's more wildfire, more drought, hurricanes, windstorms, extreme temperatures, larger hailstones, which is a big deal in Minnesota, and also floods, both rain and coastal. So that's a lot to go through, and we're going to keep this short. So I thought I might just focus on the risks that are biggest to us right here in central Jersey. And I put my property into an online tool called Risk Finder, sorry. And what it showed is that for my property, which is right outside of Princeton, I don't have a lot of flood, though many many houses here in Princeton do, but not where I am. My fire factor was much higher than I ever thought. Wind, also higher than I thought. And then heat, I of course expected. So let's just jump through those 4 sectors super quickly. Why is flooding such a big deal? Well, the rains are coming in a way that is more dangerous, and that is simply because of physics. The water in the ocean is warmer, so more of that is evaporating up into the air. The air is warmer so that it can hold more water vapor, so that when conditions are right, it means that we can have these heavy torrential rain. So for every degree Celsius the temperature increases, it can hold as much as 7% more water vapor. So as we continue to warm up, they'll hold more water vapor, and these storms will indeed increase in the future. And what does that mean? It means on September 29th, right here in our area, we experienced torrential flooding that caused big damage. And of course, New York City was impacted even on a bigger scale. And indeed, it's happening everywhere. This shows that across our nation and across the world, these types of heavy, dangerous rain floods are happening more often. But rain floods are just part of the flooding. We also know that we are also getting more coastal flooding. And that is a big deal for a state who has so much population on our shoreline. The seas have risen about 1.4 feet here in New Jersey since the Industrial Revolution. or around since 1900. And the reason why the oceans are rising are twofold. One is the land ice is melting, the glaciers up in the mountains and running to the sea. And the other is the fact that the oceans are thermally expanding. They're actually getting hotter, and as they do, they're getting bigger, which doesn't seem fair. New Jersey is especially handicapped because we were at the very bottom of that glacier, as I mentioned, the glacier that ended in exit 9. And that means now the land south of that is actually subsiding, and we are also pulling a lot of our groundwater out. So that's a double hit, forcing the land down as the oceans are going up. And the New Jersey DEP projects that, of course, the oceans will continue to rise because we put up greenhouse gas emissions. It's going to get warmer and more glacial ice will melt. It's projected that we'll have 2.1 feet by 2050 and as much as 5.1 feet by 2100. And when you think about it, Hurricane Sandy inundated our coastlines with 32 feet of water. According to scientists, that water hit 71,000 more people and caused $8 billion more of damage simply due to sea level rise, simply due to the fact that it had a higher launch pad of which to crash upon our shores. And this is really concerning to me. That same New Jersey DEP projected out some of the future flooding days, and what they show is that even on days where we don't have storms, just when the tides are rising all on their own, we are going to have significant days where businesses are closed, where school buses can't get through. According, again, to the DEP, it's projected that Atlantic City could have 95 days of sunny day flooding by 2050. And 355 days by 2100, and that's at 50%. So it's not the worst or the best, it's actually the middle probability. And those are sobering numbers, right? I mean, those are coming at us very, very fast. And of course, this gives us just another example of how fast these flood days are increasing. Okay, wildfires. I didn't think we had a problem with wildfires. I was very shocked, as I mentioned, in seeing those numbers. But in fact, New Jersey had 1,034 wildfires last year, burning over 17,000 acres. And the thing that was so concerning is because we are getting hotter and drier, our fire season is expanding. It used to be mid-March to mid-May. Now it's from February through the summer. And risk factor, again, that group I put in online to get the earlier figures, projects that 48% of New Jersey households could be at risk for wildfire in the next 30 years. Again, kind of startling. And then hurricanes. Hurricanes are getting meaner. And I can say that, I'm from New Orleans. So hotter oceans are hurricane food, right? That is really nature's way of cooling down her oceans. And the oceans are as much as 4 degrees hotter. And what that means is we're seeing a different type of pattern with our hurricanes. They're intensifying very quickly, like Maria did on Puerto Rico, going from a tropical storm to a 5 in a day. And that means we don't have time to get out of harm's way. The other thing that's really pertinent to us is that they are forming and staying stronger further from the equator, which has real ramifications for us up on the northern seashore. It means that bigger, more powerful hurricanes will probably hit us as we get further into the century. And then the last thing that we saw in risk factor was heat. And I know we talked a bit about it, but this map just knocked my head back. This is a graphic that shows the portion of the world that had climate change attributed heat during this July. 81% of humanity experienced heat that was exacerbated by climate change. And again, it's only going to get more if we continue to put up greenhouse gases the way we are. And it translates to actual danger days right here in our neighborhoods. You can see that we have almost 2 weeks of dangerous days versus back in 1970. And this all translates to natural disasters and to the fact that we are experiencing more of them and they are more ferocious. Now, scientists don't say that climate change is responsible for all natural disasters. We've always had them before. But what they do say is they load the dice and stack the deck. They make them more likely. And we're seeing them more frequently. The Red Cross says that these natural disasters are kind of our new chronic condition. They're happening almost at every 3 weeks at a very significant level, at the $1 billion level. So they're happening fast and furiously. And the thing that I think is so intriguing is that the area that they are happening the most in are in severe storms, which are just heavy rains that we don't know are coming, that we can't prepare for, and yet can cause so much damage. And I would be remiss if I didn't remind people that even as we look at a singular disaster or a singular aspect, these events have cascading impacts across our economy. And I think this is actually going to be one that we will need to do a whole nother panel on, but I just want to touch on it for a second, because I think we think, oh, it's hot, oh, there's a fire, but we don't really compute what that means financially. So when we have extreme heat, we have all sorts of health impacts. We have people with more heart and lung disease. We have increased mortality. It is the #1 weather killer. We also have decreased production. Human productivity goes down. Agricultural yields go down when we get too high. It can lead to water losses. And it also leads to transportation challenges for commerce. Why? The roads can melt. The railroads can twist. Rivers get too low for the barges. And even airplanes can't take off if it's too hot. Severe storms and wildfires hurts people, hurts communities, but it also hurts infrastructure, and it also hurts businesses' ability to continue on. And a good example of that is right here in Lambertville. When Hurricane Ida came through, there were a lot of businesses that didn't have flood insurance, didn't have the right kind of insurance, and they couldn't bounce back. That town was damaged for quite a long time, and we don't always factor that in. And then also sea level rise. And to me, this is perhaps the most insidious one, because the ramifications are so big, and yet we're only beginning to nibble around the edges. Not only does sea level rise impact our homes and communities and our water supplies, but it is projected that by 2100, 650,000 private parcels of land, or 4 million acres, will be under or below the tide line in 30 years. Guess who owns the land under a tide line? The state. The state. So that is property that will no longer be providing property taxes to that town. And that is property probably that the town is wanting to spend more on infrastructure to try to save. And that is property that's going to circle through and have impacts on the mortgage markets and even on the municipal bond markets, right? Because it's a trickle-down effect. So again, we're not going to focus on that today. Today we're talking about more individual threats from climate change and what we can do about it. But I just want to put that kernel in your mind, because it shows just how big and how insidious this threat really is. And because I totally depressed you, I'm going to give you this. This is a chart that shows where our heat goes if we continue on our current path by generation. So if you have a grandkid, you have a child, you can take a look at where they lie. For me, Gen Alpha, which is a new term for me, 2013 born, would experience almost 7 degrees of excess heat or hotter temperatures than we have today if we continue on our current path. But if we make cuts, significant cuts, they would only experience 2. So our future is in our hands. We do not have to go in the direction that we currently are going, but to do that, we need to kind of come together and be more rational on how we evaluate this risk. So with that, hopefully I didn't totally depress you. I'm going to hand it over to Steve, who will tell us how we can protect ourselves.
So from an awesome, riveting topic to insurance, which is what you want to talk about at 6:30 at night. Like, this is like great. If I put you to sleep, that's what insurance does to all of us anyway. So that's fantastic. So no. a little bit, we're not going to go through an insurance class. This is not what we're intending to do, but I want to at least give a little backdrop in terms of what insurance does and the fundamentals that'll kind of help as we go through this as to why we're experiencing what we're experiencing. So one, we cover our homes, we cover our contents, we cover jewelry, we cover fine art and boats, and we can talk about businesses, right? All the property and all the different liability and casualty lines. From there, you have all of the extra coverages. When you think about it, when you're home, it has a fire, you got to go live somewhere. Well, you got to live in a hotel, you got to go rent another home, you have to do something. Well, insurance helps pay for that. Right, because you don't want to have to, we experienced during Sandy, I remember the Howard Johnson was like $800 a night. I don't want to stay at the Howard Johnson for $50 a night, let alone $800. That's not where I'm going, right? So we need to be able to find a different way to get that, and that's where insurance comes in and risk, right? So what it is, you pay a premium, I pay a premium, right, to get property and casualty. We're not talking about health. That's a completely different world. I don't even like them. All right, so we're going to stay on the property side here, and we're going to go, all right, here we go. You have a contract, there's a claim, you would call Jeff over here and say, look, I've got a claim. They would call CHUBB, we get the claim moving, we get it settled, right? That's the idea. I hand you a contract based on premium, we will make good on that promise, right? We will go ahead and take care of your claim. There are certain exposures, though, that normally are not covered in your normal contract. One, flood, right? That's just not one of the things that is normally covered. You'd have to buy a flood product, whether that's through NFIP, through the government, or you buy it from a company like CHUBB and say, hey, I'd like to buy their personal flood product rather than the government's one. And we can get into the semantics of why, which one is better or worse, or just, hey, just buy one. From our perspective, just buy flood. Or you think of earthquake, hurricane, right? You might be in Florida and say, I don't want to worry about hurricane, but that's its own risk. There's premium associated with it, but there's different things that kind of come out there. The next step, though, that what I think is really important is that we as insurers actually go and buy insurance for ourselves. So we buy reinsurance. My brother actually used to work for Munich, so right down here on Route 1. He now is in New York City at another company, so he gave up on, I guess, Princeton. He lives in Yardley, but he wanted the trip to New York City as opposed to Princeton. I said, not a good job. So we buy reinsurance, and then funny enough, reinsurers buy insurance from other reinsurers. It gets long diatribe. But that is really where I want to start, is explain where some of this has been going that we've been seeing. As Kathleen talked about, some people are losing insurance. Where is this going? Some of it is actually from inflation, which we don't want to get into here. That's a different topic for a different day. You have catastrophes. We've had the storms. We had the random rainstorm that hit New York where all of a sudden there was 2 inches of water out of nowhere, and you're like, I just wanted my morning coffee. I didn't need galoshes and everything to go get said coffee. And then you have climate change. Right? Otherwise, if it wasn't up there, there wouldn't be no point for me to stay here. I got to talk about climate change a little bit, but we see what's going on. We know what is coming, and I think that's the difference. What Kathleen said is what insurance normally, when we price, we look at behind, we go, hey, the last 5 years, 10 years, we know what's going to happen. We're seeing now we can go back 2 years, and we're like, well, maybe, and we don't know how fast it's rotating. So what happens is these reinsurers then can give out insurance to us. They're not giving out as much. Because they're saying, wow, we've had issues in flooding in Australia. We've had heat issues in France. We've had this, pick all over the globe. They're not willing to give out what they call catastrophe reinsurance. So if they don't give it out, we as insurers have to either increase our rates because they're going to charge us more, or say, you know what, I need to get off some of these risks, unfortunately, because as a whole, I need to be around, right? We pool our resources, we pool our premiums, we cover loss. So either they don't give me capacity or they charge me more money. Well, then if I have to pay more, then we have our stockholders and we have to keep money up and put money in the bank, and it continues on, unfortunately, to the next person, to the next person, to the next. So either we've raised prices, restricted writing in certain locations, right? Or you tighten those terms. We can say, hey, you know what? Instead of having a $10,000 deductible, you need a $100,000 deductible. Instead of having a 1% hurricane deductible, you need a 5% hurricane deductible. Because I'm still willing to offer it, but you need to now hold on to more of the risk. And that's the hard part. When we start hearing that, it's like, well, what's going on? It's our relationship to say, look, we see what's about to come. We need to prepare, because when the storm does come, when we think of Sandy, we think of these big storms, they will take a lot of premium. Luckily this year, this is real wood hope, there's been no major hurricanes that have really kind of come through and taken the U.S. There was stuff actually at Acapulco, if you just go look, I mean, it's destroyed at this point. I've never been. It sounds like I won't be going anytime soon, unfortunately. but it does not look very good, right? And that was a category 5 out of nowhere, and they were not ready, right? We look at the wildfires in Maui. Regardless of whether it should have happened in the power plant, we're not going to get into how, but again, places that weren't experiencing things now all of a sudden are experiencing rather extreme weather, and then we have to pay the claims. Now what do we do? Do we rebuild? Do we pay? What's going on? The other part about this is that we're actually moving into harm's way. We don't want to live as humans in the middle of, sorry if somebody's from Nebraska, in the middle of Nebraska. So, okay, somebody's from Nebraska, so sorry, I feel bad now. I'm like, oh no! Well, you're here. Did you move here?
I did.
So see, we've moved out of Nebraska and we've come on over to New Jersey, right? So I'm not faking it. I did not plant her. I didn't know she was from Nebraska. It was the state in the middle here. I could have picked Iowa. And if you're from Iowa also, it's not working it out. So we are moving to Florida. We're moving to Texas, Galveston, Houston, those areas. Hailstorm issues, right? Minnesota, okay, it's about the same, right? Wasn't a bigger population, so you don't see it popping on the map. You see a lot from, it looks like New York. Now, my family's from Syracuse, so everybody's leaving Syracuse. There's nothing there. I can tell you why we're leaving. But if you look at New York City, Long Island, New Jersey, it looks like we're losing some population. It's more, well, what are they doing? They're just moving down to Florida, right? They're moving down, they're retiring, they're going somewhere else, or it's the second home. They're saying, you know what? Especially during COVID, I don't need this second home. I want to be done with this. We take it, we move, and we say, you know what? I'm done. I'm just going to be in Jacksonville. I'm going to be in Miami, Palm Beach, like pick your location. California, not as bad, but you're getting more people into Washington, the wildfire, the Oregons, the Nevadas. Believe it or not, if anybody's been to Lake Tahoe, Incline Village, it is gorgeous, but there's a lot of fire issues. You go to Aspen, same issue. I mean, you'd expect trees would burn, but it hasn't burned. That's the problem. Wildfire is good, in essence, because if we burn things down, trees, come down, we plant the seeds, we grow new trees, like that's a good thing. Like nature was designed. We've just moved into areas that we shouldn't have normally lived in. And now, unfortunately, nature is saying, hey, you know what? Too bad. So that's why you'll see us, if you'll come and say, hey, I need coverage for this home. You know what? I can't offer it. I can't write any more here. I have too much. I can't do anything about it. Right? So that's when you call Jeff and go, Jeff, what are you going to do for me? And he goes, I'll get back to you. So we'll figure it out. But that's why you come to a broker like CBIZ Borden Perlman, so making sure the CBIZ part. But you come to somebody who can help, who can do those things, who can find you solutions, whether it's in the admitted market where I write, in the excess market to go find somebody else, or finding somebody to help. That's the benefit of going to an independent agent, especially like them, to help you. I did also not tell them I was going to plug them, but that is something I believe. So we'll go there. The other part, hurricanes, wildfires. Don't want to go on a diatribe about how many hurricanes and how many wildfires. You can kind of see it. 2022, again, 23 is not over, so we tend to look backwards. Insurance is great at not looking at today. But we had 8 hurricanes, 14 total storms. 4 storms only hit the U.S. coastline. Oh, okay, it's 4. One of them happened to be Hurricane Ian, though. And it was the 3rd largest insured loss on record after Katrina and Harvey. Right? That's incredible when you're thinking of $113 billion in damage. So I'm a car person. You look at Naples, and I considered garages to be like aquariums. However, the fish were cars. And I saw more cars just playing bumper cars inside these garages because it was, it's elevated, the house is okay. That garage had 8 feet of water. Guess what? Most cars, unless you have a giant Hummer, the majority of your car is now underwater. Salt water corrodes your engine, it's done. That's also a public statement. If you go and find a used car and it's from Naples around that time, I wouldn't buy it. You probably had something wrong with it, but that's the issue. We're getting to places that have so much water, you couldn't have predicted that. Even if you bought the home and said, hey, my elevation cert, I said I was good. Right? This is the one that always surprised me when I saw it, that more than 75% of federal disasters are flood. I would have thought wildfire. I could have guessed hurricane just because they're big, they affect so many people, but flooding. And it's important to think about, and Kathleen talked a little bit, you have coastal flooding when we think of, you go down to, my sister-in-law's from Margate, so if you go to Margate, you can see the water and all that kind of stuff. But when we talk about Lambertville, we talk about this area here, Mercer County, I'm from Hunterdon County, you just have inundation of rain. Overnight, all of a sudden, 3 inches of rain, and you're like, why is there a small lake in my backyard? That's why. You woke up and it just showed up out of nowhere. You didn't have any time to prepare or think about how much rain, right? That's an issue. And if you can see here, in the past 10 years, there have been $24 billion flood events that totaled up to $90 billion. It's just staggering. And the part about that is how much of that was actually insured. Because remember what I said in the beginning, if you didn't buy flood insurance, you're paying that out of pocket. So it's still a loss. You just might not get the recoup from the insurance company to pay for it. So there's always construction. There's always construction everywhere, I feel like. There's always roads changing, hills changing. I came from White House Station through Bridgewater and the new bypass through Hillsborough, which, by the way, is fantastic because I don't have to drive 206 all the way down. But we cut into area that probably is different, right? And now where's the water run? Water is going to run somewhere different. Something else is going to happen. We'll see. There were a lot of smart engineers who probably figured out, let's do storm drains. Let's move things to make it help. Again, but it's your neighborhoods. Home is on incline. How many people here, their house is on a hill? Right, how big of a hill are you on? There's always some other person who's like, oh no, I live higher than you. You're like, oh, okay, fine. I've seen enough. So if you actually see on the right, this is a home that's up, but again, there was always something higher. $1.5 million home, water just ran in the front door. It didn't knock, it didn't ring the doorbell, it didn't say I'm coming, just rainstorm and boom. That is water. If you see it, that is not glass, that's not a interesting image, that is literally water in the house. So it was 4 inches of water, unless you want an indoor pool, not gonna work out very well for you, but almost $200,000 in damage. Now, they had a flood policy through us, so we covered the flood. We also then covered them to live somewhere else while it was being fixed. That's the piece that I want to make sure everybody gets away from. If a risk is not covered, remember we talked about living in the hotel and living other places. If it's not a covered loss, you also don't have cover for that. When you buy a flood policy, you are now buying back that extra coverage of staying in a hotel and not having to pay for it or whatever the terms and conditions might be. This kind of tacks on where Kathleen was before in terms of 2023. Here is all of the billion-dollar events so far this year, right through September. So we didn't get October, so maybe we missed one. And most of them are looks like a thunderstorm. It's the severe storm. For those from the Midwest, the word derecho is my favorite term for weather. It's a random storm, takes about 15 minutes, and it was like a tornado ripped through. And it wasn't a tornado, it was just a ton of rain. But you can see that's well, that's not good. You look at Minnesota hailstorm, just one day was $1 billion because they had hail. Right, we were talking about before. Or we can go to, I like this when NOAA comes out with it, spring to fall. We're not even going to give you a date, we're not even going to give time, we're just going to give you seasons, and eventually it'll end at some point. But it's mostly in the middle, right? We don't have anything, but even Hurricane Idalia, these things start somewhere and then they end up coming up to the northeast, right? We end up getting some remnant of these storms. So it's just where they start, just so where you can see. We had one winter storm. There wasn't enough snow for me this year, actually, but there was something, you just missed New Jersey. For those who don't like snow, you're very happy. To me, I wanted to see it, but we didn't have it. And then here, just to kind of go with the whole, the flooding aspect, here's a 5-year comparison. So billion-dollar disasters. On the left, we're talking about 14 to 18. And on the right, we're going 19 towards 2023. The majority of our flooding is happening in the Midwest, in the middle of the country. It's not happening on our coasts. It's not happening where we would think. Now, yes, there is rivers, and there's the Missouri River and the Mississippi, one that run there. But I actually know we have an office in O'Fallon, which is outside St. Louis. It looked like there weren't streets in front of the local coals. It was just giant water, and you needed a boat to get around, right? That's not good, but they're nowhere near a coast. So we have to realize that these things are coming, and unfortunately they're coming in places we wouldn't normally think. Now, just because there's no flooding on the right doesn't mean that we didn't have flooding, it just wasn't in one event $1 billion. Oh darn, right? Not good, right? So again, when you have these disasters, it's frequent, it's costly, and it affects everyone, right? Wildfire is coming, okay? Hurricane, there isn't too many hurricanes, although one hurricane did hit California this year. It was very rare. The first hurricane ever in the year actually hits California before it hits anything on the East Coast. But flooding is everyone. I don't care where you live. This idea of water, and just to Kathleen's point, more water in the air, it's coming down whenever. So really, everyone needs to look at flood policy, understand what it is. If you see the stat at the bottom, between 96 and 2019, 99% of counties in the US had a flooding event. right? Doesn't matter where you are. You could be the most driest, airest place in the world. Actually, there's a lake in California now. It's called a dry lake, and it sounds weird. It used to be a lake and now it's dry. They farm and they do whatnot. They're not farming anymore. It's now a giant lake. They didn't have the infrastructure ready for it, and unfortunately, now they have issues, right? So things like where you thought where it was dry was wet. Wet is now just even wetter. For anyone who has recently bought a property or then complains about why are my flood premiums so high, are FEMA maps, right? So when you buy your home, you were flood zone A, you were told, hey, my mortgage, I have to go buy this. Most of our maps, though, unfortunately, are super out of date. Now, the Army Corps of Engineers goes and does this. They've done it in Florida, you can see it's better. But if you come into New Jersey, we're talking 13, 15, 20, 30 years old, which means that, hey, when you're seeing this, hey, my home is in a flood zone, okay. Maybe not. That's just what we know from our data today. It might actually be worse, which is why it's never good to say, oh, I have no problem, right? It's kind of like saying, like, I've never been in an accident, don't wear a seatbelt. I would suggest you all wear seatbelts. It's the same concept. So what you can see here, don't worry about letter and flood zones unless you happen to own a home and you know where that is. Theoretically, flood zone A home, 10 out of 1,000 homes. The actual chance today, 15.5, okay? Flood zone X, which is what I'd say a lot of different properties are, it should be theoretically 2, it's really 13. So those locations that we consider to be not a flood issue are actually having just as many issues as a place that's, say, right on the water. So I'm going to get out of doom and gloom, right? We're try to do this a little something here and say, okay, so CHUBB itself has a practice called CHUBB Climate Plus. You can go online. There's actually a bunch of information that you can go see. And it's really our dedication to, one, covering a lot of these new clean tech companies, covering up for things that there's no insurance for. It's a new product. Whatever they're coming out with, whether it's solar, it's wind, it's electric vehicles, it's batteries, whatever it might be, there was no product. How do we cover it? What needs to be covered? We're doing a lot of that, right? So you can see some of the companies that we're working with, and then we do it in 54 countries, which means we are all over the globe trying to do this, whether it's in Malaysia, whether it's in Japan, it's in the US, it's in Africa, it's in Europe. We're trying to help, right? So there's no laser on this, is there? Yes. Sorry, laser, I can actually show what I'm trying to do. So beyond that, our risk engineering center, right? So even if I can tell you, hey, by the way, we can make this better, we can ensure these things, we can also explain to you how to make your location resilient for the future, right? As opposed to just, we'll write you the insurance and hopefully you have something. Like, no, we can come out and say, you should do this, you should put drainage in, you should put in water leak detection. Now, it's not climate, but we'll come out and do these different types of things. How can we help, right? I'd rather you not have a loss, right? It's silly, I don't want a loss, right? Let's try to get there. Right, so then you can kind of see all the different things. So you can talk renewable energy, transport mobility, storage and transmission, just reading through them. There's a lot of stuff that we're going over to try to do. Right, this is CHUBB's commitment. Right, you can go online, you can see all of them, but again, this is what we're trying to help because we realize that we have to be at the forefront because we need to ensure this stuff so that way it can keep going. So what can you do? Now some of this might be like, oh yeah, I can kind of see this, but we'll take it one step further. So it's preparing for the unknown, right? You can buy those additional products. We can talk about flood. We can talk about earthquake, again, because it's moving. Actually, I saw an article right outside Pompeii. There's been earthquakes like almost all the time, and they're worried. That's my sign that I'm done. All right, folks, thank you very much. I hope you had a great evening. I didn't know I was going to get that warning. Okay. But they're worried that actually the volcano... I'm done. I really am done. That the volcano is actually going to erupt. So I don't know what's going, but there's lots of things going on. But here, you can buy extra insurance, right, to help. That way you can be prepared if something does happen. 2, we can mitigate against future risks. So 1, when we have the air conditioning units and says, hey, we're going to put it up on a block and put it higher, we can put it higher. We don't have to go to what just code says in a building. We can make this a better building. To that same point, you can construct homes better. So there's something called fortified home out of International Building people, and you can actually have a fortified roof. You can have it strapped down. For any of those with Florida properties, you know where I'm going. We're talking about straps and we're talking about roof decking and roof attachments. We can make the homes better. It's not required, but if we make it better, then we become more resilient. And then to an insurance carrier, you become more insurable because you've actually made your house better than the average. We're more likely to try to offer insurance when we know, hey, this is a better risk. Let's try to offer something up. Right, and then we talk about new transfer risk techniques. One, something called parametric insurance, which is something that you can buy that basically triggers when a certain level of damage has occurred, as opposed to just saying something has happened. And then really it's just new products. There'll be a lot of things coming out that we're trying to figure out the new world, and we'll get there. And I talked to my New York speak as fast as I could because evidently I got told I was done. So we do want to open up to a little bit of Q&A, and then we'll kind of, with us, and we'll kind of go through.
So,
I know, you gotta use the microphone, sorry.
okay, I get the microphone. Let's see if I can find my question. So Steve, that was really riveting, and I love the idea of the focus on prevention. I think that, you can't hear me? Okay, so I love the idea of the focus on prevention because nature is playing by a new set of rules. And so we need to get in front of that. We can't always just be playing catch up and repairing because it's going to be very expensive and maybe even overwhelm us. So let's find my questions.
I answered them all. There's no questions left. We're all good. We're fine.
Oh, dear God. Who took my questions? They're gone. So I'll just wing it. So what I would love to focus on for a minute was, we talk so much about households, but a lot of people in this room are also business owners or work in businesses. How is insurance pivoting to cover and understand the new risks that businesses face versus just individuals?
For those that have it, you probably know the term, but business continuity. Right, so we think about that in our own lives, like, hey, I need to make sure the computer works and all of that. But when you've got an organization that no longer can't get there, right? So when you saw the bridge that was out the road, if I can't get to work, well, now I can't make money, right? If I was a restaurant, if I was something. So actually my favorite pizza place actually in Lambertville, no longer here, Liberty Hall Pizza, for anybody that knows it. That was my favorite, unfortunately not here. They had tap root beer. That's the reason I like it. But if you don't have flood, you don't have business continuity coverage, you don't have something to actually help from a commercial standpoint in these issues, because we can cover property, we can cover your building, we can cover your things, but it's those extra pieces. It's like, how am I going to survive if, hey, by the way, it's all flooded out, nobody can even get to my business for 3 weeks. Well, then insurance can come in. You buy business continuity insurance. You buy something to be able to help, hey, when this happens, we're here for you. And I think that's the important thing, is realizing there are other ways that we need to cover ourselves, not just in our stuff, but really thinking about our business people to make sure that they can continue to have a business. That's what keeps keeps taxes going, keeps everything else going. It's a positive thing.
Right. So one of the things that you mentioned is that people need to build things more safely. They need to raise their HVAC, they need to maybe raise their electric outlets. But what is the role of the public sector? What is the role of the regulators to help set the rules, to enable us to understand what the safe levels are and to encourage people to build in a way that's preparing instead of repairing?
From an insurance regulator, nothing, right? They're kind of like in the insurance industry. If we talk about regulators in terms of business codes or those in the government side, it's more, hey, what can we do to make sure that our areas are there, right? If we think of New Jersey, Trenton, it's near water. They probably want to make sure that Trenton's still a city at some point. They want to do something, right? I mean, maybe you like or don't like Trenton, that's up to you, right? But we have to say that the city's at least still there,
yes,
right? So it's important. But I think about a town that it's actually in Florida, it's off the West Coast. They built themselves so that they could be completely sustainable, that they didn't need anything. They have solar for all of their power. They actually had a pond and water to actually take care of all of their water. Hurricane came up, they didn't have a claim. Because they actually built it to say, I'm not going to have an issue, I'm going to build this very differently. Now, it costs more. Let's not kid ourselves. When you have to go do all of this, it's going to cost more money. So it then becomes well, can I find something? Can we make people do it more? Can we say, look, I need you to build better? I talked about fortified homes. It's kind of what Florida has done in the insurance market to say, hey, if you're going to build here, you're going to be built to Florida building code. It's 2001 is the last one. Now they're changing it again. they're saying you need to be built better. We can't have our state just be wiped off the map. So I think that's where they're realizing, hey, we need to do something so our citizens can actually live here and actually want to move here.
So what do you say to someone, and I think there's one or two in the audience who say that their family member, their friend literally can't get insurance? Like, where does someone turn when, you know, our homes are often, or most usually, our most valuable asset? What happens when an individual is exposed that way?
See, here's my plug again for Jeff. But there are, I mean, the number one is your independent agent. So if you go to a different agent and you say, hey, I can just sell you X, okay, I can sell you Y. So if you come to CHUBB and they're like, hey, can CHUBB write it? Let's say no. Let's pretend it's going to be no. There are other markets, when I touched on a little bit, the non-admitted market or the excess and surplus market, where you can go get cover. The problem is that clients will realize that it's going to cost more and probably have less coverage. Now, I can still offer that. We do that. We're actually doing a little bit more at CHUBB to try to offer some of those. It's still cover. Now, it's not going to be what you necessarily want because you want it all, like you want normal coverage like I've seen all along, but it's at least a way to get something. It might have more risk transfer, though, to you in saying that higher deductible or less additional living expense, something else kind of taken back. And if that's okay, then at least we've given it to you, right? Or, I mean, I hate doing it this way and saying, hey, I live in Florida, I don't want hurricane coverage. I personally wouldn't do that. There's a lot of hurricanes, I wouldn't go there. But those are the techniques. The agents that you work with, especially at CBIZ, they can get access to those markets. And they can say, look, I can't get you with CHUBB, but I can get you with, name your other carrier, and they can go find that. So those are kind of the options. And it might cost a lot, though, becomes the problem, because now, as we're seeing, you have to keep paying more and more because nobody's willing to give out some of this. So it is tough, and I'm understanding of that. So.
Well, in some ways, what's happening is the real cost of the risk is finally being priced into the premiums. And what we've had in the past is kind of a false sense of security, which also enabled people to move into those areas which are less safe, because like so much about climate change, the real costs are not yet being factored in across many different markets. But it's coming, and this is, I think, the beginning of a reckoning. So we talked a little bit about some new innovative products. Look into your crystal ball and give me a sense of what you think the industry would look like in the next 20 years, or 20 years from now.
I think we're still here. As much as we consider insurance to be an interesting industry, it's been around forever, right? It is weathered through world wars. It is weathered through, it's probably a bad word to use when we're talking about climate, it's weathering. But we've gotten through world wars. We've gotten through different ages. I mean, CHUBB in and of itself has been around, the legacy from 1882. How many different things have we gone through in the world? ACE, the other parent company, has been around as well, just as long. So when you're there for a long time, we've gone through these, which is why we're trying to get ahead of it, as opposed to just waiting for it to happen. So I'd say in 20 years, we're still offering coverage. We're still giving out insurance. People can still buy insurance. It might look different in terms of what I can offer you. That's just like going to the store today and saying, hey, how come I don't see this item? Well, supply chain has made, our Cheerios, we can't go get it as fast. Well, it'll eventually come back. It's all cyclical, but we have to do our part now so that way it can come back in the future, so that way we can keep doing this.
That's a good question, because you have always been there. We kind of assume you always will be, but it is a contract, and we are part of that contract, and that makes a lot of sense. Okay, last question. If you were going to move to stay safe from climate, where do you go?
Syracuse, because there's nobody there evidently, and there's nothing wrong. For those that don't know, actually, Syracuse University has the second city, that's the number 2 city with the most snowfall in the nation. It's about 180 inches of snow a year. Number 1, anybody know? Nope. Flagstaff, Arizona. It is up in the mountains, and it gets snow like there is no tomorrow. It actually beats out Syracuse, Buffalo, Rochester with all of that, which I'm like, sorry, there's like scorpions in desert. Like, this should not be occurring in this state, but it does. But Syracuse be number 2, but they've actually had less snow, which you would think is good, but now they're running out of water. That snow is actually what brought all the water to the area, so when we're not getting it, it's not good. We just see on the TV, oh, look at the football game, the Buffalo Bills got, snowed out. It's one big storm, and if you don't get that, unfortunately now we're losing. So I would move there because If there's a hurricane in Syracuse, we are in really big trouble. So.
But there may not be water. I don't know.
This is
I'm
true,
not
yeah,
following you there. We're okay.
See, I
I'm
haven't
still
drank
in the
much. I'm
hunt.
okay. So.
I'm still in the hunt. So why don't we open it up to our audience now? Please speak up. I think Molly has a mic. Nope.
I have a mic.
Yay. Okay. And who has the chocolate? We have to get the chocolate. Okay. So who has our first question? Okay. Yeah. Tanya.
So, do I need that thing?
Oh, no, speak
Yeah,
up.
I have a really loud voice. So I manage through my family at least 5 different homeowners through CHUBB. You know, it's
Thank you.
It's the best. It's definitely the best. When you talked about changing things in your home, whether it's raising it or moving this or doing whatever, as far as CHUBB is concerned, does that lower your premium, or does that just allow you to get a premium?
It depends on what we're talking about. Some of it is I can just give you a premium, I can give you a contract, but if I go, I'll use Florida, similar.
Well, Florida is one of those.
Yeah, so Florida would matter. So if you actually put in a better roof, there is a credit for having a better roof. There's a credit for having better, so when you have a hurricane, the roof itself can kind of lift. Believe it or not, it's kind of scary. That if you have ties, as opposed to having what would be like a thumbnail is what they call it, I'd rather have straps as opposed to having that. That gives you a reduction in premium. You can put in, we think of like spray insulation, you can do that actually around the envelope of the inside of that attic, which means that even if it did lift, water can't get in because it's non-permeable. That gives you a credit. So there are different.
Perfect example, my sister's in Charleston, cannot get insurance. She just moved, she's right on one of the tidal rivers, can't get it. So would CHUBB go to her and say, all right, if you know, okay, just move your house up, that shouldn't cost you more than $1 million, whatever. I mean, all those houses.
Yeah, no,
they're
yeah.
all up anyway. But I guess what I'm trying to say, if, you know, changing what you're doing or where you're at and mitigating it however you're saying, the cost of that versus assuming you can get insurance, you know, I think we're all trying to figure out how not to pay a fortune.
No, yeah.
CHUBB, because we love CHUBB, because we've had claims and they're covered, completely covered, but it's getting harder and harder and harder to justify having insurance. To be honest.
And that does become some of it because you can go, you know what, I can just mitigate this. I'll just pay it myself. I'm not going to worry about it. I'll take the risk, right? Because we see the short-term, I won't pay the $5,000, the $30,000 premium. We'll go South Carolina. We'll jack the premiums up here a little bit. And you go, what's going to happen? You know what? I'll save the money. And the problem is then we don't realize, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have done whatever the claim. Right? So it's like, I'm done. So I just cannot do this and keep talking. I don't know. My car seems to still be there and it's not on fire. And I think that becomes now in those areas that are cat prone, because catastrophe from a hurricane standpoint, we will say, hey, we need you to have this size home and these characteristics. And if not, we can't, because we can't offer it then to everyone. We can offer it to, I don't want to say a select few, but like a subset. So if you had a brand new home as opposed to a home from 1910, it's going to be built to better codes. It's going to be built differently, right? Even then, if we can give you coverage, you look at flood. Well, if I raise my mechanicals and whatnot, you can get better flood premium. It does come to a point, though, in certain areas where a lot of people, we've seen it in Florida. If you see the news in California, it's occurred, where it's like companies are literally just pulling out and saying, we're done. Yeah. So it becomes a, well, then who's going to even offer me if nobody's standing? There are other markets that will come, or it's that excess surplus kind of market where you can go get it. You will just now, unfortunately, pay even more. So then it becomes weighing, is the insurance or the price worth it? I mean, I'm always going to say insurance is worth it. One, because I work for it, but two, I'm not a risk taker. I buy everything I humanly can because I don't want to worry about that in the future. Now, again, it might happen that I need to stock that's too expensive. It's something I'm willing to put in, but again, when we're talking about 30, 40, 50, 60, we're talking about big numbers. That becomes difficult because even now your mortgage rates are really high, everything else keeps going. It's like, well, when is this going to stop? And I think that's the hard part. And you got to get your chocolate too, so make sure you get your chocolate.
with every bunch. Okay, go.
We have right here in town on Palmer Square an outfit called Climate Central.
Well, we have,
They are able to pinpoint any place in this country, or even to a certain extent around the world, the comparative risk and the kind of risk. I mean, they're wrapping their minds around, in a very scientific way, what you can predict to a certain extent and what you can't, and they narrow the unknown a little bit, but they're better predictors of all this. And I just wondered to what extent CHUBB is tuned in to this kind of work, which is super sophisticated, and it's not got all the variables covered, but it's better work than I know any place else. And I was just curious about your position on that.
well, we should say that we have Bernadette from Climate Central right over here. Thank you, Climate Central. So,
There is a lot that goes into it, and I will say we can either buy data, right? So we can go to a company and say, I need you to supply me with this information. You can say, hey, we're going to make it ourselves. The piece, at least from the personal line, so I'll talk from personal lines, that is where I am. When I want to go take rate, I actually have to get our regulators to approve it. So whatever data I have to give, and they have to agree that this is something that they approve of, I can use and do something with it. So if I go to Florida, they're going to say you can only use this model or this model, no one else's. If you go to, so to go back to the Florida piece, if you go to California, you can use this model or this model, thank you very much, it's been approved. So sometimes the data is nascent. While we like it and we understand what's going on, everybody has to come along for the ride and get to that point. And I think that's part of it. It's like, oh, we know it's coming. So we will look at our data. We will use information, whether it's from Climate Central, whether it's from ISO, Verisk, LexisNexis, some of these other outside vendors who can at least give us that data. And then whatever we can do, the best of our ability to use it. Now, it might not be in pricing, but it could be to the point of, I know where your home is. You know what? I don't want to insure this one because it's on the side of a hill and an avalanche is going to occur. I don't want to cover the avalanche risk. But I will do this one or I will do that one. So there is some of it in there. It's getting everybody on board from the top to the bottom to agree that, yes, this is good, quote unquote, data and something able to be used.
Kathy?
This question's for Steve. Steve, could you go into a little bit more detail for the audience about the differences between admitted and non-admitted insurance policies?
Could you repeat the question?
Beyond the premium.
Yep. So the question was, what's the difference between admitted and non-admitted insurance? So admitted insurance is what you would have today. You have your car insurance. Hopefully nobody here has home insurance. That is in the non-admitted market. And it's great. What admitted means is that I have to file with the state all of my contracts, all of my rates, and it's all good. That's what you buy. That's what you can get. The problem comes in, as we're learning, is that sometimes there'll be a location that no one wants to write, in which they're going to be told there's no insurance. What that normally will trigger in an insurance person mind is, okay, I cannot get that in the admitted market. I can go to the non-admitted. We've heard of Lloyd's of London. That's kind of like the more famous in terms of going to a very interesting land of insurance. But that's still the same concept. We have that here. We write CHUBB, excess and surplus is the term we're not admitted. But it normally means that the forms are still regulated, the pricing is still there a little bit, but you have a little more freedom. So now all of a sudden your terms are different. So instead of having extended replacement cost where we'll repair your home no matter what, you're capped at 110%. It means that additional living expense we talked about, instead of it being unlimited, 20% cap. So we start capping the amount of coverage, which now of course means less coverage. And then there's a premium then for that. So you do find the cover and it is able to be, I'll say, adjusted differently than in the admitted market. Again, we still file. The states still know what we're offering up, but it's a way in which you can get a little more leeway and find ways to find cover. Does that help, Kathy?
Ross? Ross? Who's over there?
CHUBB is going to handicap whatever the conditions they're currently being confronted with, whatever the odds are. But Kathy, the issue here is hugely political, and and polarizing. And but there has to be an entire reset so that all these conditions become, less volatile. How do you get these two knucklehead parties together, or the world? Forget that, the whole world, to start talking the same language, because it doesn't really seem like it's going in that direction.
Well, I should probably hand this over to Bernadette, because she is the expert who has been to all the COPs in Dubai. We're going to our first one in December, but she's seen it in action. But I can only talk a little bit about my experience traveling the country, and that's not the world. Everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants a healthy, prosperous future for their kids, and they want a prosperous current life for themselves. And they want to have a sense of optimism and a sense that they can grow and achieve more. That's universal. There is a narrative that is that climate action harms that, dampens that, precludes that, harms future generation because you're using money now that if we strengthen the economy would enable them to handle it better in the future, and the risks are perhaps overblown. But that narrative is not holding up as the world around us is burning up, right? The storms, the burning, the people are noticing, and what I'm hearing a lot more people say, oh, of course it's happening. And I gotta tell you, 3 years ago, I heard a lot more people saying, I'm not sure it's happening. It's happening. What they aren't as positive of is how much of it is human influenced and how expensive will it be to address it. And again, as I mentioned in the intro, we have a way now of kind of showcasing the fact that the economic story is really with taking action. It is a little bit of upfront investment, but on the other side, there's a lot of savings, and you have ancillary savings across healthcare, across pollution, and in lessening these externalities from climate change. And that, coupled with the jobs that are coming, it's definitely changing the narrative. They still don't want the words climate change, but use the words emission, use the word sustainability, use the word conservation. And the fact that businesses are making the changes, irrespective of what we're reading in the newspapers, they are making the changes internally, and they are driving those changes within the states, sometimes forcing utilities to move a lot faster than they would. So I'm a little more sanguine than you are, and I have to be to keep getting on a plane, and I think our team has to be to continue to work that we're doing. So Dan.
One of the things that I'm seeing as an implication of the insurance transition we're going through is that insurance is, well, I guess it always has been, but it's becoming more so something that only people with money can afford. And we're going to exacerbate the split in society at the same time where many of these places that are very much at risk are not wealthy, right? The Newarks, the Jersey cities, the Atlantic cities, all over the place, worldwide. How is the insurance company reacting to that societal schism between those who can afford to insure and those who cannot?
Repeat the question, please.
So the question is, do I want to put myself into a hole and make myself sound awful? No, the question is, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer is kind of a short version of that statement. Fair, I mean, like, because but it's, you can't afford the insurance. So when I don't have it because costs keep going up, at some point they're living at a certain level and it's gone above that mean where somebody with a lot of money might have more expendable income to get there. I think it's tough. I mean, to me, I'm not sure. I mean, we all have a place to be able to offer insurance, to be able to give it out. And then you're going to get to a point where, hey, then maybe it does become a government issue. Like we have FEMA, as much as that every time the government says they're not going to fund something, FEMA goes into a tizzy. It's like we're not going to have any money to pay for stuff. It might be something like that. It could be community pools where you could say, hey, you know what, this whole area, the city is going to insure block X, block Y, and these are like the to be determined. I'm off the top of my head, I'll use the crystal ball. Hey, hey, you know what? The city of Newark will insure block 7, and it's going to be insured for this much, and everybody will be able to pool and will be part of that. So you'll have something. Now, it might not cover everything you have. Again, I'm off the top of my head here. That might be a way, right? We can partner public and private together to solve the problem, because one isn't going to be able to solve it without the other. Right? We're all going to have to kind of be in it together. So that's a way. I don't know. It is actually, it's a great question, and I'm not sure we all have the answer yet to figure out, because I do agree we will have this dichotomy of moving apart for everything, all of society, no matter what we're talking about, right? So it is something that we need to be careful of.
Okay, I think we're just about out of time, unless there's, I'll tell you what, we're going to,
Just on that, can I just comment
Yes.
on that? So have you lost, has CHUBB lost, I won't say revenue because your revenue goes up, but customers because your premiums have gone up? I mean, it's sort of going on to what he says, the ones that could afford it to a point, now they can't afford it anymore.
We'll always, I'll use the word churn. So customers will come in, they'll say, hey, I can't pay for that. I'm going to go to State Farm. Again, I'm using CHUBB as a high net worth, and I'm going to go to your more middle market carrier, right? I'm going to go to Travelers. And they'll go for less premium because like, hey, I need to save the money now. I'll take the difference in condition on the contract or something. We will. Right now, do we want to lose them? No, we'd rather not lose anyone. But if I don't charge a premium, then I can't insure it for everybody. So it does become a pooling effect. Again, insurance is the, hey, everybody pools in for everybody. Unfortunately, it's like 80% of your premium is 20% of your, like that whole 80-20 rule. That also then doesn't feel fair in the long run. You're like, but I'm part of that 80 who needs the cover but doesn't have any problems. It is tough, right? And we will get there. And there were people, I mean, I'm sure, CBIZ can more say, how many times do you get a call to remarket an account because, oh my gosh, my premium has gone up X and help me?
Every day.
Yeah, so it is tough.
thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, CBIZ. Thank you, CHUBB. Thank you all for being here with us today. We so appreciate you giving us your time and attention, and we will keep you informed of our next fun elaboration of climate change.
We're going golfing.
Golfing. Thank you. And thank you.